We're talking about the 7 feasts in Leviticus 23, and very significant. I'll do the quote again. Rabbi Samuel Raphael Hirsch said, "The Jew's catechism is his calendar." Seems kind of strange to Gentile, right? If you just hear that, cold turkey. And Paul in Acts 20:26 said, "I record this day, I am pure from the blood of all men, for I have not shunned to declare to you the whole counsel of God." And this is stuff that we usually miss. So real quickly, we talked about chronos and kairos, the times and the seasons. Chronos is the Greek word for just time, the natural flow of time. Kairos is special periods of time. It could be a day, it could be an hour, it could be 1,000 years. It's just a special period of time marked by certain characteristics, okay? Then we went to, and all of these points will relate to the 7 feasts, okay? So we talked about that. We're going to find out that the feasts are kairos. They're special periods of time. But more than that, they're called, the feasts are God's appointed times. He calls them that. And what's the Hebrew for that? For God's appointed times?
Oh, maybe I got it written down in my brain. Is that word?
The feast.
Moed or no?
Hey.
Moedim.
Oh, look what I got there for point number 1. The feast equal moed. That's where it says the feasts are God's appointed times. So we know the feasts are moeds, or moedim. I should say moedim. Moedim. And what's ha-moedim?
The feast.
The feasts. So the feasts are moedim, are God's appointed times. And what's one of the, according to Strong's Concordance, moed is a what? A signal. Signal. A signal. Or a sign.
Rehearsal?
It's a signal, it's a sign.
Yeah, rehearsal.
Yeah. No, that's coming up, the rehearsal. That's mikra. But anyways, so we see that the feasts are moedims, which are signs. What's a sign? It's not the reality of it. It's telling you something's coming, right?
Right.
Something's up ahead.
Right.
All right? Then we're going to see that in the Septuagint, what's the word that it uses for moed? Kairos.
Yeah.
Remember? Special periods of time where God, I'm going to add a little bit to that definition, where God acts in extraordinary ways. That's all the feasts. They're signals, they're moeds, they're kairoses where God, special periods of time where God will act and move in a way that he normally doesn't. Okay? Then we looked up in the Greek New Testament a couple things that were called kairos, second coming, and the rapture. Okay? And we get that from Mark 13, and we also get that from 2 Thessalonians 2, 1-6. Yeah. So the rapture is called the kairos. All right? Now here's a remnant. 1 Thessalonians 5:1. But of the times and seasons of the chronos and kairos, you have no need that I write unto you, because they knew it. And the remnant is this, the hint, the little clue there is of the feast, of the seasons, of the kairoses. Of the feast, I don't have to write to you about them because you know the timing of them, which is exactly what we're going to be looking to. Okay? It also says that the feast are, the feast are God's holy convocations,
That's right.
which is what's the Hebrew?
Mikra.
Mikra. They're God's mikra, which means in Strong's, not Ed's fanciful lexicon that he just made up. It's actually in Strong's, it says, it defines it as a rehearsal. So rehearsal is where they come together for the feast. It's a rehearsal. It play acts what's going to happen, right? It's not the real thing. But from that feast, you can surmise what is predicted. So we come to the conclusion that the feasts are what? They are prophetic.
Yes.
So you see where I'm heading with all that, right?
Yes.
Then we talked about God's appointed time, the Moedim. Okay? Again, this all relates to it, okay? Now, in Genesis 1:16, and God made two great lights. 1:14. God said, let the lights be in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons. That word for seasons is not spring, summer, winter, and fall. It's Moedim. It's appointed times. He's saying they're going to point towards the feast. Okay? Then we talked about the woman of the apocalypse, Revelation 12. Remember back in 2017 what happened? Well, we talked about the Mizrath. What's the Mizrath?
The Hebrew mysticism.
It's the Hebrew astrological signs.
Gospel.
Sun, moon, stars.
Yes. In other words, there were 12 constellations, but originally people thought, and this is based upon Genesis 1:16 and from ancient records, that they told the gospel. And why wouldn't they? God's handiwork, is in the heavens. And so it probably pointed, but as usual, what happens down through the ages, Satan comes along, corrupts it, makes it astrology, not astronomy. That's legit. Astrology. He makes it occultic. Okay? So what happened on September 2017? There's a sign. The constellation what? Virgo, the Virgin. Revelation appears, 1, 2, and 3. Talks about a woman appeared, great sign appeared in heaven. He calls it a sign. It's the same word that God uses in Genesis 1:14. He says that these lights in the heavens are for signs. When you go to the Septuagint. Same word. Okay, it's like Simeon or something like that. But anyways, a great sign appeared in heaven. It was a woman, clothed in the sun, with the moon at her feet and 12 stars at her head.
Wow.
All right? Now that's kind of strange because the Virgo constellation in 2017 in September, she was clothed in the sun was behind her, the moon was at her feet, and she had a constellation of 12 stars on her head. Wow, that's kind of strange. And then there was a comet that shot from the loins of the Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah, to the woman, okay? And then it caused Jupiter, the king planet, to go to her womb, stop, and then come down in between her legs, as in giving birth. Wow. I mean, is that all coincidental? Am I talking occult? Am I talking astrology? No. This is all
Really happened.
what happened. Some people say that it happened only one other time, and that is at the birth of Jesus and in September. Okay? And some people say, well, it also happened at the creation of the world. So who knows? I don't know that stuff. These are, people who look at the stars and the patterns and all that. So maybe not. So we see that all happening. All right? And then Jupiter would come between her legs and exit. We were all excited and stuff. And I did call you a few weeks before and said it wasn't the rapture. And I said, see, there you go. I got verification. And here's why. Here's why. Okay, exactly. Because it happened on September, the Feast of Trumpets, and it was right against the Feast of Trumpets, which represents the rapture. Okay? And it talks about when she gave birth to the man-child, and Jupiter's the king planet coming out of her. And when he gives birth to the man-child was caught up to the throne of God. That could represent two things. The Peshat, or the obvious interpretation, that's Jesus, right?
Right.
But also there's a remnant, is there a hint of something else, and that is the body of Christ being raptured. And it happens almost on trumpets, but here's the thing. It happened on September 23rd, and the Feast of Trumpets was earlier. Or excuse me, the Feast of Trumpets is September 23rd, and this is all happening the 20th to the 22nd. I just called Brad and I said it would be the same exact day if it was going to be the rapture. And it wasn't, obviously. Okay? So, what was the message there, you think? That
This is a rehearsal?
Yeah, that is closed.
Oh, wow.
Just like that sign was there just before the Feast of Trumpets. It's saying it's closed. Now, does God give warnings?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He gives us all kinds of warnings. Okay. Do we listen? As a nation, no. We just keep going our direction. So he's given us, Christians who can hear and listen, I believe he's given us warning. So for me to say the rapture is close, that's no revelation in and of itself. I'm just saying, look what's coinciding during all this time. Okay, then we talked about that God's appointed times, the moeds, in the heavens, and also God's appointed times in ELS. What's ELS stand for?
Equal distance sequences. Letter sequences.
Yes, letter sequences. You guys know the Bible codes where you take the Hebrew manuscript and say, I'm going to take every 10th letter. And you take every 10th letter and it spells something. Okay? Ha-moedim. The feast. Statistically, in the 78,000 letters in Genesis, it should show up 5 times. It only shows up once. And this is where you can do different spacings. And it shows up at an interval of 70 letters. Why is 70 significant? Because that's how many ha-moedims there are to the Jews. 70. Okay? And it centers on, guess which verse? Guess which verse that skips in the very center of it is? Genesis 1:14. Where he talks about the stars up there for signs and seasons. It centers on Genesis 1:14. Now, is that a coincidence?
Oh, wow.
It may be, but when everything comes together like that, I find that hard. We are going to start right now and go through this, because I want to start next week actually on this 1 Corinthians code.
Wait, you cannot do a code if you haven't finished the feast.
I know. Well, you didn't hear what I said. I want to finish this.
Oh, you're going to finish the feast tonight.
Yeah, finish the feast tonight so I can start on the code.
Wait.
Okay, yeah, no, I haven't even, okay.
Whoa.
Here's
Where did all
point.
this feast come from?
Huh?
Where did all
Leviticus 23 is one of them. Leviticus 25. Well, Leviticus 23 has their 7 annual feasts, okay? And then Leviticus 25 has the year of Jubilee every 50th year. And then scattered throughout are like the new moon celebrations, all that kind of stuff. So as a lot of it's in Leviticus, some of it's in Numbers, all right? And they're known as Sabbaths, the feast. So it's not just the 7th day. Also, the feasts are called Sabbaths. Okay, types and shadows. All right? Now, we're seeing there Colossians. Let's see what Paul says. 16 through 17. Colossians chapter 2, 16 through 17. He says, feasts are the shadows, but not the substance. Now, listen to what it says. That no man, therefore, judge you in meat or in drink, are in respect to a holy day, or of a new moon, or of Sabbath days, which are shadow of things to come, but the substance or body, or the reality of it, belongs to Christ. So he's saying, when we go into all these types and shadows, if you dig deep enough and you put Jesus there, guess what happens? The interpretation comes out. And all 7 feasts point directly to Jesus, which we'll get into. Okay? Now, when it says holy day, that's what they used, a holiday. That's where we get the word holiday. It used to be holy day. You know, it's a holy day, it's a holiday. Okay? But the word there is actually festival. All right? And he says, don't anyone judge you in regard to a Sabbath, whether you keep it or not. Okay? So if someone keeps the Sabbath, don't let that bother you. But if someone tries to tell you you have to keep the Sabbath, then just refer them to this passage. All right. So the substance belongs to Christ. So he's saying the feasts are shadows. And the substance is Jesus. That's what he says in these verses. Everybody got that? They're shadows. So again, we're going to see the feasts are prophetic. So I'm telling you, there's 50 different ways. Yeah, I like that number. 50 or 70 different ways that point to the feast being prophetic and pointing to Jesus. And I don't have to guess, because when we get in the 1 Corinthians code, it's all there. All right. So, here's an example. Luke 22:19 through 20. Okay? How the feasts point to something. And that's Luke 22:19 through 20. All right. He says this. And Yeshua took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and gave it unto them, his disciples, saying, This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, after supper, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood, which is shed for you. Okay, so what were they celebrating? Passover. Exactly. So he's saying, you know what? This bread here in the feast, that represents my body, and this cup that we're drinking, that represents my blood. So he interprets it that way. He's saying, look, the Passover is me, my body and my blood. Okay? So again, this is not me being fanciful. This is in the scriptures themselves. And this stuff was not even in the scriptures on how to celebrate it. This is what the Jews developed later. Like I say, watch the Jews and their culture, and it's still being used by God. You will unlock different truths. Okay, like for instance, I'll give you a quickie. Pentecost. Guess which book they read on Pentecost? The book of Ruth. Now that should, if you guys understand that, that should be like, doing, like really? Okay. Okay. Well, Pentecost represents the church. Ruth is all about the church.
Wow.
But I'm going to break that down in a
Boaz
second.
is Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Kinsman Redeemer.
Yes.
But Ruth wasn't a Jewish, right? She was.
She's a Gentile.
She's like
She's a
us.
Gentile.
Was, yeah.
But she
It's
was just
where-
like us.
Well, I'm going to get into
We're
it.
Adopted it.
We're the
Yeah.
Gentile bride.
Yeah, I know. So it just, there's so many things that when you look at it, the Bible in a more rabbinic way, that just, it blows you away.
Wow.
It's like, this is so obvious. But of course, how come the Jews can't see that?
Spiritual blindness.
Yes, Romans.
12.
Romans
Scales
11.
on the eye.
11, 25 and 26. Behold, I tell you a mystery,
Scales on the
that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until, that's not always, until the fullness
Of the Gentiles.
shall come in. Yes, until the church is complete, then the rapture, and then we're going to have the tribulation period. Then the scales will be lifted according to Hosea chapter 5, last few verses, and the first few, chapter 6. Another thing that relates to the feast are 7 feasts. I'm going to show you some sets of 7, okay, that give a complete picture of something.
It's going to get tested later.
Okay. What's
Pay
he?
close attention to you.
Oh, to me?
Watching them. Yeah,
Is he
he's watching.
taking notes?
Yeah.
Okay. So up here, okay, sets of 7. They give a complete picture of something. Now, we talked about before. Actually, I didn't put it in my notes. The shamash, and this is. I always say shamash. It's shamesh. I was up in the hospital a couple of years ago because I would get away. I'd go in the waiting room on the second story right where you walk in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you could be right there. And I was reading my cultural Hebrew books. It's like, shamash. And the guy starts talking about what it is. I've never heard that before. Now, this is the true story. I never heard it before. And all of a sudden, it's like a movie. I could tune in downstairs, and the guy there at the receptionist goes, what's a shamash? Or shamesh? I go, I just read that. I'd never heard that before in my life. And some other Jewish guys started explaining it to him. It's just like, this is freaky. So, shemesh. Shemesh, yes. So what that is, they mean servant. It's usually the guy in the synagogue has certain duties and stuff. It's servant. Now, if you look at a menorah, okay? If you look at a menorah, you'll see it's really 6 candlesticks held by one.
Yeah.
Okay? Is really what it is. And actually, you know what the menorah is? It's not a candlestick. If you read it closely, you know what it is? It's a tree. It's got pomegranates and other things on it. It's the tree of life. So it's a tree of life. But anyway, so the middle one is what the Jews call the Shemesh. And what you will find in this, keep this in mind. I heard this from a Hebrew teacher. I started doing this like, you got to be kidding me. If you look at sets of 7, okay, a set of 7, the fourth one, i.e. the middle one, is always significant. If you look at sets of 7, the fourth one or the middle one's always, and it somehow points to Jesus in a really good way or a really bad way. Okay, so we're going to go look at sets of 7 that give us complete. How about the 7 churches?
Yeah.
Revelation 2 and 3, right? 7 letters to 7 churches. What happens in that 7 letters to 7 churches? He gives you the complete history of the church. They're prophetic.
Yeah.
And they say, well, there's 7 types of Christians and 7 types of church. That's true. But there are also 7 church ages. And what's the 4th church? Thyatira.
Yeah.
And why is that significant? Because it endures to the end. It goes through the tribulation period, and it ends up in Revelation 17 and 18. Did you get that? Thyatira, the 4th church, the middle church, is significant because it goes through the tribulation period. Just read the letter.
Interesting.
And it ends up in Revelation 17 and 18, the whore of Babylon. Okay? So that's why it's very significant. Okay? Then what? Here's another set of 7. How about the 7 paraboles, parables of what? Matthew what?
24.
Matthew
25.
12. 13?
Yes! Matthew 13. 7 parables of Matthew 13. Now remember we went through the Matthew progression?
Yeah.
And we talked about how Jesus comes, he has the genealogy, he presents all his credentials. Then in chapter 12 he's rejected.
Yeah.
I think in chapter 11 it says, woe to you, Chorazin, woe to you, Bethsaida, because if the miracles have happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, they'd be here to this day. There's a rejection of the different cities of them. Then you get to chapter 11, chapter 12, and then the leaders accuse him of what?
Last
Being the Son of God, is it? Or-
No, accuse him. In other words, they say, you're doing your miracles by what? The power of, Beelzebub, Satan, another name for Satan. And at that point, he starts turning to the Gentiles. Anyways, the 7 parables also give you, get this, the complete, the church, or the kingdom that he came to present, the millennial kingdom, the messianic kingdom, now becomes the mystery form which we call the church. And the funny thing is, if you keep the 7 letters lined up exactly and the 7 parables lined up exactly,
and
they fit each other.
the 7 feasts.
Yeah. Yes. I thought of that. I put it, and I'm going to have a chart later. But anyways,
Did you give us a chart?
no, not of that.
Oh, you did.
And the 7 feasts also line up in the order that they're given. Now, is that all coincidental?
No.
No, not even close. So, the 7 parables of Matthew 13 and the 7 letters give us the complete history of the church and beyond. 7's complete art or have a complete picture of something. And so, how many feasts are there? 7 that are annual feasts. Okay. 7 feasts. And we're talking Leviticus 23, so we're going to go through that now. All right. Ooh, we're making good time. Okay. The first one is what?
The Sabbath.
No.
Oh, you did.
Annual.
Passover.
Yeah.
Passover.
Passover. Okay. And these are, and I'll show you how they all come. Okay. And then what after that?
Unleavened bread and feast of first fruits.
And I want you guys to kind of learn these because we're going to be going over and over them. And there's a certain order. The order is very important. And the order that he gives them in Leviticus 23 is the same order that they fall on the calendar year. In the same order that they're fulfilled. Okay? So what's after unleavened bread?
First fruits.
Yes.
The third feast.
First fruits. Okay? Now all of these are first month on the Jewish calendar. Jewish calendar, not Gentile. Passover occurs on the 14th. Unleavened bread is the next day after that, and it's 7 days. Okay?
So, be the 21st.
Yeah. Or when it ends. But it's going to be celebrated 7 days. Now, first fruits is kind of weird because it occurs on the day after the Sabbath, after Passover. Everybody got that?
Yeah.
It occurs somewhere within unleavened bread. So, you have Passover. That starts a 7-day feast called unleavened bread. And whenever the Sabbath occurs, it has to occur somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
It has to, because it's 7 days. Whenever the Sabbath occurs on unleavened bread, the next day is first fruits. Which is why we know Jesus was risen on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Get it?
Yeah.
See, the year that Jesus was crucified, it occurred after the 3rd day. So in other words, he was in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, and then he was raised on the first day of the week. It was the day after the Sabbath, which is the 7th day, which is Sunday, is the first day of the week. Is Sunday the Christian Sabbath? I'm supposed to say, is Sunday the Christian? Yeah, come on. Is it?
No.
Sure, it'll
It's
be
the
any
Jewish
day.
Sabbath.
Is Sunday the Sunday now? Is Sunday?
It's the first day.
I got to bait you guys. Is Sunday the?
It's the first day of the week.
Yeah, the
Friday's given away.
Sunday.
yeah the Sabbath. Sunday is not the Sabbath. The Sabbath has never changed. It's from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. That's always the Sabbath. And so people say, well, now God changed it to Sunday. Where did they get that? And they have passages where the church met on the first day of the week and stuff. But no, the Sabbath is still the 7th day, sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. Okay? Just keep that in mind. Okay, now, so we got these all in the first month. And then, first fruits is the first day that 50 days later, okay, occurs what?
Pentecost?
Yes. What is the Jewish name for that feast?
First fruit.
Shavuot.
Shavuot.
Which is weeks. Oat at the end of. You remember how Im makes
The
it plural?
Feast of Weeks.
Yes,
Weeks.
yes.
The
Im
end
makes
of
something
bar.
plural, and depending on what part of speech it is, oat also makes it plural. Like bar mitzvah. Mitzvah is commandment. Mitzvah oat is commandments. So bar mitzvah is son of the commandment. So oat. So we're saying, so it's Shavuot right there, 50 days later, which will occur in the 3rd month, okay? And I have charts and stuff. I can probably have a handout next time that kind of puts it graphically, okay? Now,
So first fruits is Pentecost?
I'm sorry?
First fruit
No.
is Pentecost. Okay, I
It
think so.
begins at first fruit.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
50
sorry.
days. Okay, I'm like so
Yeah.
confused.
First fruit is
Then
the
you start
first
counting the
day.
50 days.
Yeah, you take the omer, a certain amount of barley.
Yeah.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
first crops
Do you see that
of
pattern there? 7 weeks, and then the 50th day is
It's like
Pentecost.
Jubilee.
7 weeks of years, 49 years, and then the 50th year is the Jubilee. And I'm going to go into that a little further. Do you see patterns here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. God has so many patterns and we ignore them. So that's 7th month, right? As trumpets occurs, then what's after that?
Yeah, I asked this.
Day of
The
Atonement.
Day of Atonement.
Day of
Okay,
Atonement.
Rosh
okay.
Hashanah.
Okay, yeah, and I'm going to talk about Rosh Hashanah. I remember how I spelled by saying at 1 mint. Oh, tricky way. Okay, which is where you become one with God because your sins are going to be forgiven. And then after that is what?
Feast of Tabernacles.
Yes! Or Sukkot, which is, I think, the Hebrew word, which is, you see the OT there? Again, it's plural. Sukkot, which is tabernacles or tents.
Is that why they build those little things?
Yes. And we're going to go into it a little more deeply here on why they build those little tents. What does that represent, right?
Yeah.
In other words, they're memorials. They have a past meaning, they have a present meaning, and they have a future meaning. If you really dig into it. Yes?
Did you miss Day of Atonement?
No,
No, at 1 minute.
what he missed
Atonement.
was the one that we always talk about, which is the Jewish New Year.
Oh, Rosh Hashanah. This is,
That's not a feast that's
Yes.
in the 7, is it?
they don't celebrate trumpets, you know, or I shouldn't say that, they do, but they make it what? They call it Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, no.
Shana.
Because I wonder what you're, I never heard of trumpets.
Yeah.
Across each other.
It's called, Rosh Hashanah literally is head of the year or the New Year's Day. What? Real quick explanation
Okay,
on
blow
why.
the shofar on that one?
Yes, but that's really trumpets that celebrate.
Oh.
That's what
Yeah.
it says in my Bible, trumpets, feast of trumpets.
Exodus 12:2. When he was celebrating Passover, which was the 7th month, he says, "This shall be the beginning of months for you." Got that? So the 7th month became the 1st month, and the 1st month became the 7th month, which means previously trumpets was the 1st month, 1st day. Where did they get that? From God. If it was the 1st month, 1st day, that means it was the day of creation. So they know it as the birthday of the earth. So it's the new year. You see what I'm saying? That's why they say, "Oh, trumpets, it's Rosh Hashanah, the new year." Does everybody kind of get that?
You got that, Scott? Okay.
Okay. All right. So they're not exactly the same thing. You can make them the same thing. Rosh Hashanah, trumpets. But Rosh Hashanah, trumpets is, well, I just gave the explanation of why. Because it was originally the 1st month, 1st day, which means it had to begin, it had to be the beginning of creation. And I'm going to get into that further later. Is that making some sense? So the switcheroony came in Exodus like 12:2. This shall be the beginning of months for you. The month of Passover. Then he starts explaining the Passover. All right. So trumpets is on the 7th month. Which day? Come on, you guys know. 1st day, I just said.
Yeah,
1st day.
month, 1st day.
Atonement is what? Day of Atonement. 10th day. And then Sukkot is 15th day. And actually, we're going to break those all up really in detail later. They all represent something, and they all have fulfillments. And here's what messes people up, this 5-day gap. Actually, this gap right here messes people up too. The 1st and the 10th. Doesn't the tribulation period begin with the rapture? No, it doesn't. It's just kind of sloppy theology. Or how about this? When Jesus returns on the Day of Atonement, if that's true, which I'm going to show you later, doesn't the millennial kingdom begin then? Nope, it doesn't. We're going to find out why. So those are the basic. I'm going over this fast. I realize that. Those are the basic 7 feasts in order. Okay? So it gives you a general outline. Everybody kind of got that. Now, at this point, I'm supposed to sit down, shut my mouth, and then ask
When
them
did all
questions.
these take place? And were they one at a time?
One at a time. When?
Yeah.
Oh, like the Feast of Trumpets, the next one coming up is September 25th.
No, I meant way back in.
Oh,
In the wilderness, right?
yeah. Well, we're going to cover that next.
Oh, yeah.
Because they have three different levels of meaning at least. So we're going to look at that in a second. That God in Garden of Eden, some people interpret it this way. They were clothed in light. I don't know how this works, but some people say that when he gave them skins for covering, he gave them this.
Wow.
Not animal skin. He gave them this.
What?
In other words, they didn't have skin before.
Who's fun?
They were, I know. They were
That's
clothed.
Why did they need to
People
cover
say.
themselves? They didn't have warmth.
They were clothed in light. Now, you see again,
Oh.
we don't understand the Garden of Eden. Like the snake was upright, is it correct? Because part of his curse was what you shall crawl on your belly all your days.
Oh.
So he wasn't some slithering thing. In fact, he was probably the most beautiful creature there. Was the serpent. It was the curse that he became what we know as the serpent today, or as snakes. Okay, so if that makes any sense. Okay, so now I know. I keep on all these things.
Stop talking about that.
This is Stump Larissa.
Okay,
like,
I know that's hard to do.
We're gonna have some Sunday school teachers really battling out
I know.
these things because
I know. The Garden of Eden was totally different. We'll see when we get to heaven, and we'll know how it was and all that. But we have our Sunday school image, right? And if you have a picture Bible, then you know what I'm saying. It looks like that. I'm going to go over quickly this next part, and we'll review it next time, so I want you guys to get it twice. We're going to talk about the feast, okay? There's 3 aspects to the feast. Memorial, which is the past, okay? And then it's actually, if you look at it, cultural, which is the present. And then we have a prophetic aspect to it, okay?
Which is
Which
the
is
future.
the future. So they work on all these different levels, and we totally ignore them. Which is why we did the Passover this year. You could see a little bit into what it is, okay? And what it's not some kind of a cultic thing. It's not some kind of, we're going to sacrifice a lamb for our sins or whatever, like some people are fearful of. It's nothing like that. Was that, how many of you guys went to that Passover? Most of you guys were at the Passover, right? Wasn't that kind of enriching? The feast of memorial past, agricultural present, and then the future. Now, what do you think Passover represents? In fact, that's what Pesach means, the Jewish word. It means pass over. What passed over?
The death angel.
The
Yeah.
death angel.
Blood
Yes.
on the door.
Yes. And so that's Exodus 12. Passover, we're talking about memorial now, okay? That's the past. It represents the death angel flying over, okay? How about unleavened bread?
When they were going in the
That is
desert,
supposed to be the,
they didn't have time for it to rise.
Yes, J.J. Good. It speaks of them leaving Egypt in haste. The night they left, they had to take unleavened bread because they didn't have time to rise. So it speaks of the haste of which they left. Now, these other ones, you have to kind of dig out and realize the typology.
So what
First
is-
fruits,
What is this matzah? Is that what they called it?
huh? Yeah.
Matzah.
Yeah.
Water in there.
I think that's even the Hebrew word in the scriptures.
Mm.
Okay, first fruits is what? Well, let me put it to you this way. Who left Egypt? The first fruits.
Oh, wow.
Get it? The first fruits left Egypt. In fact, when they go to 40 years later, when they come to the Jordan River, and then they were celebrating Passover around that time, and then they come to, which was the first city?
Jericho.
Jericho. They weren't to take anything. Do you know why?
It's going to God.
First fruits.
First fruits. It was all going to God. It was all going to God. So you can line that up with them conquering, Joshua conquering 7 nations for the children of Israel to go into the land. Okay, now, so first fruits is the people coming out. Pentecost. Now that's trickier because you have to kind of have a timeline in your mind. After they left Egypt, about 50 days later, as you look at the timeline, guess what happened? Mount Sinai and the giving of the law.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the Jews point to as Pentecost celebrating. How many people died that day? Giving of the law.
3,000?
Yeah, Acts chapter 2. When the Spirit came, how many people?
3,000.
3,000.
Added to the church.
The giving of the law, 3,000 died. The giving of the Spirit, 3,000 lived.
Lisa's going to be really sad she missed this.
I
Yeah.
haven't seen.
Did you hear it? It was
So,
very
So-
important.
50 days since they had left Egypt?
Yes.
Wow.
That Mount Sinai happened. And so that's what the Jews connect it to, and I think they're right when they do that. Okay? Now, so that's Pentecost. So, Sinai. And then this is, so Sinai, when they received the law, that was on Pentecost.
Moses giving
When
the law?
Moses gave them the law.
First fruit.
That was 50 days after they left Egypt.
Okay, first fruits are the, and in fact, that's where, if you look at it closely, that's where the nation is born. When they leave Egypt. That's where they're finally looked at nationally.
Yeah, but they were there for more than one generation.
400 years.
Yeah, I was there for a
400.
long time.
And so that's one of the things where God said he'd bring them out in the 4th generation, and they're 400 years there. So some people say, well, generation is not the 40 years like in the wilderness. It's 100 years. Some people say, oh, no, David in the Psalms, it's 70 years. So that's not real clear. We have, what's the next feast after Pentecost?
Trumpets.
Trumpets? Which one?
Rosh Hashanah.
Okay. No. Rosh Hashanah. It's trying to tweak me here. Okay, trumpets. Now here's where it kind of starts. Now listen to this closely. The trumpets was called a Shabbaton, which means a Sabbath rest. Okay, in Leviticus 23, okay, where he gives the 24 through 25, Shabbaton, which is going to be kind of significant because later on. And it's the Feast of Trumpets is what you would call a bit of a mystery.
Sabbath rest, huh?
There's only like 1 or 2 verses on it, and it basically says, get up and blow trumpets. That's it. Like, what? That's it? That's it. Get up and blow trumpets. Yeah, now, you could maybe, and I just thought of this, you could relate that to Exodus 19 at the giving of the law. You know why? God came down, Moses went up, and they met.
Wow.
God came down, Moses went up, and they met. Okay? In the
Went up
air.
the mountain.
Yeah, he went up the mountain.
God came
So I'm saying in typologically,
Okay.
there's kind of a little bit. No, I'm not saying that's what I believe, but think of trumpets as a mystery. And isn't there something else called a mystery?
Horrendous.
Are you talking about when Moses went to Mount Sinai? Because isn't that Pentecost, not trumpets?
Yes, but also I'm just saying it's a picture. Exodus 19. So trumpets, a mystery. The church is a mystery. The rapture in 1 Corinthians 15:51 is called a
mystery.
behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. For at the last trumpet, that's a mystery. So then the Feast of Trumpets is a mystery too. That's kind of freaky. Okay, now let's look at the at 1 minute. Okay, now that is a day to get right with God, and a lot of Jews connect that to the second giving of the law. Remember when he came down the mountain the first time? What happened? They were partying.
Yes.
They were doing this and that. And so Moses had to go all the way back up the mountain, which is a long climb if you get the real Mount Sinai. Even if you use the fake one, I think it's a long climb. Anyways, when you go up there, he goes up there, has to, redo the 10 Commandments, brings it down, the people have to get right. Probably happened on the Day of Atonement. Okay, memorials. And then the last one is tabernacles. And what does that represent? And this is kind of answering your question. Why do they build Sukkots? Why? The answer is it represents their 40 years in the wilderness where they tabernacled or camped out with God.
Oh, so it's like shelters too, right?
Yeah. So you build with sticks and stuff like that, plants, and you got to be able to see out of them. You got to see out of them. In other words, you got to realize you're out in the elements, and it represents you out in the wilderness with God, the Jewish people out there with God.